American Progress, and you're in the stream.
Hi, I'm Femi. Okay, welcome to the stream, everybody.
I'm Malika Bilal. If you're watching us on YouTube, chat us your comments, your questions. We'll try to get them into the show.
Today, killer robot technology, should it be banned?
We'll look at the debate over letting weapons decide when to pull the trigger.
Using artificial intelligence, or AI, weapons of war are being programmed to be smarter and more independent. But should machines be given the ability to decide when and who to kill? Representatives are meeting this week in Geneva to consider a preemptive ban on autonomous weapons technology that may someday power what activists call killer robots.
The world's high-tech militaries, including the US, Russia, and Israel, are all eagerly pursuing AI applications. But is there a line developers shouldn't cross when creating weapons designed to think for themselves? Well, with us to talk about this, in London, Elke Schwartz. She's a member of the International Committee for Robot Arms Control, or ICRAC. She lectures at the University of Leicester and is the author of a soon-to-be-released book, Death Machines: The Ethics of Violent Technologies. In Geneva, Paul Shari. He is Senior Fellow and Director of the Technology and National Security Program at the Center for a New American Security, and also author of a forthcoming book, Army of None: Autonomous Weapons and the Future of War. And in San Francisco, Alex Salkiver. He is a writer and futurist and the co-author of The Driver in the Driverless Car. Welcome to all of our guests. We could have a book club with just you three, so good to have you here. So we asked our community their thoughts on laws, which is lethal autonomous weapon systems and what some are calling killer robots. This is what one person tweeted us back, and that's because this is what's in the public imagination. It's a GIF, and it's from the Netflix drama Black Mirror, and it depicts a robot designed to kill. This robot, in fact, is taking a knife and is going to pursue a woman. But Paul, how far from reality is this? What's your definition of a lethal autonomous weapon?
The kinds of intelligent robots that are in that Black Mirror episode, which is a great episode, are quite a ways away still. They're still in science fiction. It would be possible to build weapons today that hunted military targets. Things like radars that are emitting in the electromagnetic spectrum would be easier to distinguish, particularly if you're flying through the air or at sea where there's not a lot of other objects or civilians in the way.
Guess I'm just curious about this phrase, killer robots. When I say it, I don't know whether to cry or to laugh. I have two exact opposite emotions. Alex, this term, is it helpful to us to understand exactly what we're talking about?
Sorry about that.
That's all right. I have the same cough. Are you feeling in good shape?
I'm obviously very nervous, but no, I think it's a good term because, excuse me, it's very easy for the general public to get the concept of what we're talking about, which is robots that kill people.
Yeah. Alex, I'm just going to give you a beat. Catch your breath. Okay, this phrase, killer robots.
Yeah, I think it's a useful term against sanitizing what the technology could potentially do, which is kill. So it might be slightly overdrawn, or it might appear to be slightly overdrawn, and of course it invokes always this idea, the image of the Terminator. But I think it's useful to have evocative terminology in order to also bring it home to the general public what this technology could potentially be all about. So I think it's quite a useful term. Is it technically accurate? It's a different story, but I think it's a useful term.
And just spelling it out so everybody understands for the rest of this conversation, a killer robot or a lethal autonomous weapon system is a weapon that can make a decision about a kill without a human necessarily being involved in that equation. That weapon can kill by itself.
Right, so the controversial technology that is being debated is lethal autonomous weapon systems, and the function that is most controversial are the critical functions, which means engaging, selecting a target and engaging a target, meaning finding somebody and killing somebody, to speak it bluntly.
And so, but also, just to interject, there could be situations where humans may be killed because the system is doing its job recognizing an image or a footprint. So, for example, what Paul's talking about, if there's a human in the radar station, they would die if it's struck. Or if a AI is programmed to recognize a tank as a Russian-style tank in a field of battle, and that is a target, there are humans in the tank, then they could die. So there's sort of these gradations along the way. It's not just find, a human, identify them, kill them.
So
but
Alex,
when you're
talking about the gradations, and I hear you, Paul, I'll give this to you. Alex mentions the gradations. I get what you're saying, but I want to make sure our audience is on the same page. So one person sent us an example, and I want to hear what you think about it. TD Gordon says, when that man in Dallas killed 4 cops, they blew him up with a robot. So this is clearly real and happening now. And what he is referencing is something that happened in 2016. This is from The Guardian. Use of police robot to kill Dallas shooting suspect believed to be first in U.S. history. And it was the lethal use of a bomb disposal robot. Is that what we're talking about, or is it slightly different because the robot itself didn't decide to deliver that bomb?
Precisely. Yeah, the robot did not make the kill decision. I'll let Paul talk on that. But it's a very different animal.
There are 16 countries today that already have weaponized robots and a number of non-state groups. So the debate going on internationally about autonomous weapons is really looking forward into the future and saying, as Elke described, what happens when the robots themselves are making the decisions? And so it's not people killing other people with robots, it's people launching robots, and then the robots are making these decisions. There is some debate over whether we're talking about robots that are targeting people or military objects. And depending on who you talk to, people have very different views about what's acceptable.
I want to share with people, because we're not in science fiction world right now. There's a story that you put out in the Wall Street Journal, Paul, and you say, meet the new robot army. Intelligent machines that could usher in an era of autonomous warfare are already here. I want to give people a couple of examples. These are illustrations, but these are pieces of weaponry that are being used right now. The Uran-9. What's the Uran-9? What does that do, Paul?
So the Uran-9 is a Russian ground combat vehicle that is entirely robotic. It is equipped with a machine gun and anti-tank rockets. So it's designed to go toe-to-toe with other tanks and blow them up, and there'd be no one at all inside it. Now, what's not clear is who's pulling the trigger. Is there a human remotely deciding, and that is really the essence of the question with an autonomous weapon, or is the robot deciding on its own? We don't know. You can look at it, but you can't see from the outside what software it has and how it's thinking.
Okay, let me do another one here. This is interesting. This takes us into the oceans here. Scroll down a little bit more.
So this is the Sea Hunter.
Yeah.
This is a U.S. Navy ship that's totally unmanned on the surface, that's designed to hunt for enemy submarines.
Right.
And it's currently unarmed. There's no weapons, but the U.S. has talked about putting missiles on it in the future.
So this is actually out here. Why are we getting illustrations, Paul, and not the real thing? Is it so secret?
There are pictures of them. Maybe it was a rights thing. Yeah, there are photos of them out there.
I could show you, but then I'd have to kill you. One more here. This is a long-range anti-ship missile.
Yeah, so this is the long-range anti-ship missile. It's also called the LRASM. It's sort of on the cutting edge of intelligent missiles today.
Yeah.
A human still decides the target.
Right.
So there you see it zeroing in on a ship.
Okay.
Yeah, a human said, I'm going to take out that ship.
Yeah.
But the missile has a lot of autonomy in how it gets to the ship and to navigate all on its own.
So what I understand, Paul, because I read your article very carefully, is that if it sees obstacles on its way, it's not going to do a little detour and blow up something else. It's going to make a decision and then keep going onto its target. And the missile's going to do that. It's going to be thinking.
That's right. And the missile has the ability all on its own to avoid other threats that might be in its way. So if it sees a ship on the way to a target, that it sees as a threat, it'll veer around it to stay on course to its target.
If it works as designed, which is a question a couple of people are bringing up, what happens when they don't, and who then takes responsibility for that? So I want to play a video comment from Thompson Shangeta, and he talks about some of the legal implications behind this. And Elke, I'll direct this to you. Have a listen.
Where killer robots are used, we are likely to have an accountability gap. There will be no human responsibility for use of weapons. This is an affront to the recognized principle under international human rights law that victims have a right to remedy. A right to remedy includes prosecution of the perpetrator. International humanitarian legal norms are timeless. In this case, it is not the law that has to keep up with the technology. It is the technology that should keep up or conform with the law.
So, okay, who is responsible if the robot makes a mistake?
Yes, well, that's the million-dollar question, really. And I wholeheartedly agree with Thompson's comment in the video clip here. The problem really is that when you have technology where you don't exactly know where the decision is made or how the decision is made, who can be accountable and who can feel responsible about it. So it is not as easy as it would be with okay, I'm using a tool and I'm actually actively pulling the trigger, I am therefore responsible. There's a whole decision mechanism which cannot necessarily be attributed to a single person or a unit, but rather could be happening, or the decision could be happening by programming, through an operator, and a whole system of participants. So putting your finger on accountability or responsibility in the first place and then legal accountability is really difficult with those systems, and that is obviously a huge problem for existing frameworks.
Alex, you're nodding.
I'd also add that countermeasures are something that we've seen in military systems forever. They will be deployed against AI systems as well, too, potentially to really tragic results. So, I mean, we already see systems or situations where non-state actors use human shields to hide military targets behind them. You could see that as the reverse for political means, meaning that they make a school bus look like a tank to draw AI fire. Additionally, there's a whole field of computer science now in AI called adversarial attacks, where you make things appear to be something that they're not in order to fool the AI. So, I mean, as we strip humans out of the decision loop and the time between essentially the decision being made and the impact happening or the trigger being pulled, the bomb blowing up goes to nearly zero, the time to correct these kind of errors shrinks and becomes negligible.
So, but the problem here is the accountability gap is a risk. It could happen, but there's actually no principle in the laws of war that says you have to be able to hold an individual person accountable. That's actually not a thing. It's appealing personally, I think, to many people to say, well, who's responsible for this? But there's nothing in the laws of war that says you have to have that. And there are accidents that happen today with people, with humans.
Sure, but there is something really profoundly morally troubling about not having anybody be accountable, specifically when it comes to kill decisions, specifically when it comes to decisions to eliminate a human being or an entire group of human beings. So saying that, okay, well, this may happen, this may not happen, it happens in other contexts, is not really helpful to unpack or perhaps even limit what is quite clearly an accountability gap with systems in which a decision may be pre-programmed, in which an algorithmic decision might be taken. Sorry?
There are accidents. And accidents
I'm actually describing countermeasures, like if a terrorist group decided to fool an AI and instead ended up blowing up a school.
And again, those things happen today.
They do, and with AI, it's going to be much more difficult and much more challenging. And I'd also add that that most of what's happening with AI, we make it sound like it's some proprietary magic technology. It's actually all open source software, and the compute necessary to run AI is shrinking and shrinking. AI will be something that every actor can use that is able to effectively manipulate computer systems.
But and here's another problem, which is algorithmic bias or bias in artificial intelligence systems. And this is something that the entire artificial intelligence community knows.
Okay, do you want to just give an example for us, a very quick, vivid example for what you mean by bias?
Okay, so my prime example always for algorithmic bias is something that we're all familiar with, right? If you go into your Google search engine and you type in CEO, and this is an example that Kate Crawford uses when she talks about algorithmic bias, and you type in CEO, what you will find is usually largely white, middle-aged men. There's the odd woman, there's Barbie as a CEO, but that's sort of scattered.
If you type in beautiful woman, it's all blonde women too.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
So we won't stop and ask, how does Alex know that?
I've actually written about algorithmic bias.
All right. So, yes. Yeah. Your studies have saved you. Okay, continue.
Yes. So the way things are labeled, in order to be able to be processed through algorithms, is by no means clear cut, right? The data that you feed in, the training set that you have, these are all decisions that are made beforehand, and they may not necessarily represent the entire diversity of the population you're dealing with. And so once that is in the system, it's very difficult to untangle or disentangle, what is already data that is coming in as biased and what comes out as some sort of...
So, okay, you're basically saying we could end up with racist weaponry.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, Malika.
Well, okay. I mean, in some
I'm
sense...
glad that you... I hear you there, Alex, but okay, I'm glad that you brought that up because we got this question specifically on that case as what human biases will be programmed into the robot. She's assuming that they already will be, but of course we're all biased, so that is a good assumption. But I want to shift just a little bit here to bring up this tweet from Anthony, who says, the list of countries who wants to ban them is the same as the list of countries that can't make them. Be careful what you're cheering for. It may not exactly be accurate, but Paul, his point there, I think is well taken, and you being someone who actually has been in the arena of war, you were in the military. What do you make of being on a battlefield when automated weapons are either alongside you, on your side, or on the opposing side?
When we look at, I think it's a great point. When you look at the list of countries that have said they support a ban, none of them are leading military developers. And what's driving, for many of them, their desire to support a ban is not humanitarian concerns, it's politics. Now, the NGOs, like ICRAC and others, they're motivated by the humanitarian concern. But for many of these countries, they don't have to know what autonomous weapons are to know that they're against them, because they know they're not the ones building them. And when you look at some of the list, a lot of them are not leaders in global human rights. And so, internationally, ultimately what drives the conversation is politics among nations.
I'm just curious about this. Let's just boil this down to basics. The fact that you go to war using a machine or using some weaponry that's making its own decisions, okay, why is that worse than going to war without that?
Because I think when we go to war, we have to think about how to achieve peace. So there should be a reluctance towards violence or the use of violence. It should not.
But we're already at war, LK. That's not even really. That's not a realistic. That's a historian's perspective, knowing that at the end of this war that we're already in, that there's going to be peace negotiations. But we're in it right now, and we're killing people. Why are you? Why would you be more upset about how you kill somebody?
Because certain technologies, I fear, lower the threshold for the use of violence. So there's more violence. And there's plenty of scholarship that shows that more violence is not likely to lead to a more peaceful context down the road. In fact, there's an escalatory dimension to that. So as you lower the threshold for the use of violence, and as you feel, or as the current thinking becomes, or as the thinking becomes, okay, we can have this technology where we can perhaps engage more risk-free in the application of violence, I think a distortion takes place in terms of how, or the dimensions that are necessary to solve a conflict.
So, LK, there's someone
there's an important difference.
There's someone who agrees with LK here that I just want to get them, and this is live on YouTube. Tom says, wouldn't killer robots desensitize humans to the already atrocious acts that they would be committing? So picking up on your point there. But on the other side, Alex, this person says, having killer robots do the fighting would keep soldiers and police officers out of harm's way. Alex?
So what I was going to point out is that emotionally, I kind of want to agree with what LQ is saying. But if you look historically, as we've injected more and more technology into warfare, the levels of casualties and violence and incidents of warfare has actually gone down. At least that's according to what Steven Pinker writes about in, Angels of a Greater Nature. And, we don't know enough necessarily about AI to be sure that it will be worse to have AI than better. And I'll give a specific example. If there was a way to codify an AI not to kill civilians, or to recognize children very clearly. AI does a much better job of this kind of stuff over time in the heat of battle, and it also doesn't get tired or snappy or angry. It doesn't take drugs. It isn't drunk. it won't make the kind of human errors. So I'm kind of on the fence both ways, but that's like the counter argument.
It also can't have mercy. It can't surprise you with spontaneous humanitarian acts.
Could you program it to have mercy? Could you do an algorithm that was a merciful algorithm? And what about sexual violence? No sexual violence in the field either.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, there's horrendous things human soldiers do. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Humans are entirely and utterly fallible, and there's terrible things being done. And I wouldn't, by any stretch of the imagination, try to mitigate that. But we also have to consider the fact that humans can also do very positive things, very good things. There's empathy, there's compassion. There are ways of acting, human relations that I think are important to not do away with for the sake of technology. I don't think you can code laws or rules or ethical guidelines into machinery in some way, in some form or another. But that relies on some sort of quantification of what you think is good and what is bad. And everything that you cannot mathematically quantify, i.e. program into a system or code, then kind of falls by the wayside.
Paul, what are you thinking?
I think there are ways that, I do think that there are ways that we can find ways to balance both of these concerns. To use the technology in ways that reduce civilian casualties and reduce the risk to soldiers, but also hold on to our humanity. One of the things that people mix up a lot of times is the value of physical robots and giving soldiers or police officers more standoff from threats, and then autonomous weapons that would make their own decisions. And I don't like the term killer robots, and I think it mixes up all of these important differences among the technology. If you could increase the physical distance so people aren't at harm's way, and they don't have to make a decision in the moment, do I shoot right now to defend myself? That could reduce harm in warfare and would be a good thing. There might be other things where we could use AI to make factual decisions. Is this person holding a rifle or are they holding a rake? And we can do that. We can do that with AI today. I agree with Elke. We probably still want to find ways to use this that we hold on to our humanity, that we don't get to a place where humans no longer care about what happens in war. I think that would be terrible.
So, Paul, it sounds like you're saying there is a middle ground here. There is a way to make this work. But I bring John's tweet in here. He says, lethal automated weapon systems are problematic because it's uncertain that their automated intelligence algorithms are capable of meeting the international humanitarian law requirements. And so, Alex, I'll actually give this one to you because right now we have state actors who don't meet international humanitarian law requirements. What is it about these robots that means they might be different? Is there a way to program them so that they do?
In theory, you could program to meet any requirement. As Elke said, if it can be reduced to mathematics of some sort, a code of conduct, then you can program to meet that code of conduct. There will always be edge cases because the world is very messy. But at the same time, it certainly is easier to encode that type of thing in computer code than it is to figure out how it works in our brains at this point. But one other point I'd sort of make around this is that whether we like it or not, we're going to have to fund a lot of research around this, even if we have banned it, because we're going to have the capability for countermeasures should someone else use it, or just the ability to deal with it in case that it gets out of Pandora's box.
I just want to do a lightning round in the 60 seconds we have left. In 10 years' time, will we have killer robots? Alex?
Someone's going to build them. Someone won't care about international humanitarian law, whether it's terrorists or rogue actors like Bashar al-Assad, who's terrorizing civilians. Like, someone will build
Someone's doing it. Someone's probably doing it right now. Okay. Will we have them?
Somebody will probably build them. But I would really wish that we have some sort of robust international legal framework.
Get a plan.
Or some sort of norm established that the use of them.
Okay,
for
Paul,
functions as well.
Alex, it's been a pleasure wrestling with this ethical conversation. Malika?
Sarah Rashid's here says she doesn't think there's a willingness by governments to ban the use of AI robots, and it would be the equivalent of governments turning in their guns and promoting world peace.
Thanks for watching the stream. You'll find Malika and myself online at #AJStream. See you next time.